Hi, welcome to the One True Church. I'm Hugh Whitmore. I'm continuing my series on Revelation Decoded, and I'm up to chapter 21. I'm going to do chapter 21 alone today because it's got a lot of verses, and I want to be able to get through it without it being too long. So let's get started. In the last couple of chapters, the first beast of Revelation was judged and punished, which is the world governmental system. The second beast was judged and punished, which is Paul, and those who believed in Paul were also judged and punished. And Israel was judged and punished because they were named as the whore of Babylon. Here in chapter 21, it paints the picture that the One True Church will really be proud of because you will be earning it. Let's get started. 1. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. So these terms, heaven, earth, and sea in this case, are completely metaphorical for spiritual energy and transfiguration, because we're talking about a spectacular transfiguration of energy. A new heaven here is the one that has been fully and finally glorified by the physical works of the saints, which have become the new spiritual eternal heaven. The earth is a metaphor, of course, for the church and the doctrine of the church all throughout Revelation. And the earth is passing away because the physical bodies of the saints are now in their new eternal configuration. There's something to look forward to. There's no more sea. That's gone away because the sea is the secular world, comprised of those who ran the governmental beast system, and of course all the non-believers, Paul and those who worship Paul, and the destroyed enemy of God, who was Israel. All these are burning in hell. 2. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. This is a physical metaphor, as our extra-dimensional spiritual efforts are becoming first-dimensional in the form of the New Jerusalem. Like the original creation in Genesis, spirit is taking form and substance. Only this time it's the spirit of the church. You remember the spirit was hovering over the water in Genesis. 3. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. And they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. Here's God and his word among us. Isn't that wonderful to think about? Because previously it couldn't be, because Paul's false testimony destroyed the power of God's salvation and arrested it, stopped it from happening. And this is another proof of why Paul's writings are the abomination of desolation, standing in the holy place that Jesus mentions in Matthew 24:15. 4. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Can you imagine this? I dream of this. No death, no sorrow, no tears, no pain, to be perfectly eternal in angelic form. Just beautiful. You know, everything that goes with death will be gone too. The fear, the unknowing, the slow decline into old age, and all of the aches and pains that go with it. We'll have no sorrow from lost love or lost money. We won't be lied to or ripped off. We won't live under the sinful world government that makes us sick with their poisoned food and medicine, the crime they promote, and elevate sin to an art form. We also will feel absolutely no desire to sin. Imagine that. 5. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. This shows the written word has power, and that by our obedience, God makes all things new for the ones he loves. 6. And he said unto me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that thirsts in the fountain of the water of life freely. It is finally done, because when Jesus was on the cross and about to die, he said in John 19:30, It is finished, which meant that he was going to overcome death, which was the first part of the mission of the cross, but also return the kingdom, which was the second mission of the cross. But that second mission didn't happen. It didn't get done because Lucifer overcame God. as he has for all of these centuries. And he did it at that moment, at the cross, and just after, by killing John the Baptist, then Stephen, and then the Roman Empire martyred a lot of Christians. And then Paul's false testimony came along. So the kingdom waited until our time, over 2,000 years, for its return. And the idea that it is finished at the cross feeds into this false Paul culture in the church that everything is done for us, which ignores 2,000 years of reality that Revelation is an interrupted prophecy. 7. He that overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. Us, the Son of God. It's amazing. Once again, the Bible reiterates here also that our works will earn a reward, and those that work the hardest will earn the most. Throughout the Bible, the word son has been reserved for God's most obedient people, like the times when Israel was devoted to God's law, or for King David, who was a man after God's own heart, and for Jesus, of course. And now in the end, son is reserved for the saints of the church. That's us who threw off the chains of Paul, like Jesus required us to in Revelation 2:2, and love the word of Jesus. 8. But the fearful, the unbelieving, and the abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars. Think about all liars. Think about that in your sin life. I do. Anyway, all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. For fearfulness to cause eternal death is interesting, because fear is related to faith, and faith is misunderstood. Faith, as it relates to God, doesn't mean something you can't see but believe in. Faith is the internal certainty that you know you will obey God no matter what. That's what faith is. Also, you Paul believers are on this list for the lake of fire because you are the unbelieving. You don't believe in God's method of salvation that Jesus died to bring us. You believe in Paul's fake version of grace. 9. And there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. 7s represent God, and especially God in his fully glorified form, which we finally have here in Revelation. The bride is us, the one true church. 10. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and he showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. The phrasing is interesting here, and it's a bookend to the similar phrasing from when Lucifer took Jesus up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world to tempt him. Now we have God showing us that he is back in control of the formerly tainted earth. 11. Having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like jasper stone, clear as crystal. The description of the New Jerusalem goes on from here, but note that it is the physical embodiment of God's glory, which God obtains from us, his obedient believers. We, by our actions, faith, works, and obedience, become the New Jerusalem, another transfiguration of spiritual energy, glorious and beautiful. 12. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. This number 12, and repeated like this and over, and being so ritual to God and so important, is another repudiation of Paul, who was a false apostle, because there were only 12 picked by Jesus, and the traitor Judas was replaced, making 12 again. So the idea that Paul could be the 13th apostle is preposterous. 13. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, and on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. This is a series, of course, of spiritually powerful ritual numbers, 3s, 4 3s, adding up to 12, the same 12 of the apostles. 14. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Here are our apostles again, the 12, meaning those from the foundation of Jesus' ministry. Jesus had promised the 12 real apostles that they would be given a reward in heaven in Matthew 19:28. In the New World, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. You know, this is not that exact reward, but the 12 real apostles do have a reward they earned. And Paul is not mentioned as getting a reward because Paul was not an apostle. You know, this is the thing the Paulines never want to address. If God planned for Paul and loved Paul so much and entrusted Paul with leading the entire church into a new type of salvation, why isn't Paul mentioned and rewarded at the end of the world? The glorious outcome of all of history would be due to Paul's miracle turnaround from murderer to long-suffering teacher of God's salvation, wouldn't it? But God doesn't even mention him. 15. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lies 4 square. That means perfectly square, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. There's that number 12 again. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. 17. And he measured the wall thereof, 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. This measurement is like the measurement of the external courtyard in Revelation 11, where God knows how much glory he possesses from the saints, and with it, he's measuring for the numerical spiritual dimension that serves his ritual worship requirements. The Bible is a book of numbers, all culminating into this spiritual transfiguration of our energy into this perfect plan God has that we fulfill. Magnificent. 18. And the building of the wall of it was jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. 19. And the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third a chalcedony, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the fourth an emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth a topaz, the 10th a chrysoprase, the 11th a jacinth, the 12th an amethyst. 21. At the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every gate was of 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. You know, these stones and glass are examples of conductors of spiritual energy. The eternal city would have to conduct a great deal of spiritual energy from the eternal worshipers of God and Jesus in order to stay eternal. 22. And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. This was foretold, prophesied in John 2:19 and 21, where Jesus says, destroy this temple. He was speaking of the main temple in Jerusalem. And in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, it has taken 46 years to build this temple. And will you raise it in 3 days? But he was speaking about the temple of his body. When Jesus overcame death, he became our main object of worship, the new temple, taking that function away from the temple. But when he left to go to heaven, we were left with the Word of God in the Bible as our main object of worship. Paul took over that object of worship. He hijacked it, infiltrated it, which is why Paul's writings are the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Jesus in Matthew 24:15. 23, almost to the end. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. This is proof that God had his glory previously tied up in his creation. This is why I tell people God is limited in his power until this end time. His power is tied up in his creation. You know, part of which was the sun and the moon, and that Jesus was created to bring the eternal light of life to mankind. These all require power, and it was all tied up in these things. This is the omnipotent power of God that will return in the final age. And the word omnipotent, the only time it's used in the New Testament is in Revelation, when God is fully glorified by his saints. 24. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. Are there still kings of the earth in the eternal city? No other information is available for us on this interesting question. We'll have to speculate on that. 25. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. Why would there be night when the full glory of God and Jesus are on display? 26. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. All will worship God in the end, which is what keeps him in power, the eternal worship of his eternal creatures and saints. 27, last verse. And there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defiles, neither whatsoever may make abomination or make a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. See, we'll have no impulse at all to sin. We can't even make a lie or an abomination. Abomination is just a sin. This is eternal, pure worship energy to run God's kingdom. This is the state of being we saints will be in when we no longer have any impulse or desire to sin. What a beautiful and glorious outcome for us long-suffering believers here in chapter 21. One more chapter to go.